Are you playing this to
it is something that is informing
speaker?
you about the expertise or the quality or the skill involved in that particular thing. For instance, a pianist, a violinist, a scientist, a racist. Okay, why do you have this suffix? It is because when one is proficient in the violin, one becomes a violinist. When one is proficient in science, one becomes a scientist. When one loves his race, one is a racist. However, it does not necessarily mean it has to be in a negative way. For instance, let me explain, please. Let me explain. When Elijah Muhammad was born in 1897, racism was in the world.
That's right. That's right.
Right? You agree with me? Okay, so don't talk about Elijah like he invented racism. Racism was in the world. The slave master came for us in 1555, 400 years ago, and we can take it back beyond that. However, the point I'm making is this. Now, with Elijah, you got to understand now that he was born into a world where he was witnessing black men being lynched. He grew up in that era where black men were hung for no reason, where we were subject to all manner of disgusting treatment and disgusting laws. Ku Klux Klan killing us, burning us at the stake for no reason other than the fact that we were black people. Now, when Elijah Muhammad, look, the Jews, Adolf Hitler engineered a program where he caused 6 million Jews to be killed in gas chambers during the Second World War.
Blog Talk and the best show on the internet. Nobody, and I mean nobody, tackles issues like inflammatory talk. Shut up. And Mr. Midnight Movie. Shut up. And Jewish producer.
Hello, son.
Shut up. We tackle the things that nobody tackles.
Hello, son.
Demand answers.
Hello, son.
Stop walking on eggshells. Shut up.
Hello, son.
Goofy Bone can get off his bloviated fat enchilada ass and start talking about La Raza.
Hello, son.
Jocking it. Pimp Daddy Joe Pete. Jocking it. Pimp Daddy Joe Pete.
Whipping the skippy all day long.
We're making a movie about white guilt. We're going to examine all these facts. Shut up. The civil rights movement today basically protects criminals.
Okay, stop interrupting me.
We're making a movie about white guilt.
Okay, stop interrupting me.
Shut up. We're making a movie about white guilt.
Done in a beautiful fashion. The documentary, at the same time, both prose and poetry.
It's not the noble movement that it was.
I'm above you on all these issues. I've been to the military. I have served in the capacity to protect your rights to bloviate. To protect your rights to bloviate.
Who are you to tell me what my style is, you meth addict?
I've been to the military.
How do you know I'm a meth addict?
I'm above you on all these issues.
How do you know I'm a meth addict?
You haven't served in the military. In fact, you wouldn't be fit for the military.
I'm a racist, and I don't consider myself an especially evil person.
What's this got to do with the price of rice in China?
Well, I'm just telling you, I'm a better man than you are.
You're a narcissist. We've established that.
Okay, stop interrupting me. You could not defend the very rights you enjoy. You are the ultimate invalid.
I put stock in you.
I'm wondering why Mr. Solutions isn't on Debbie Daly's show.
What's this got to do with the price of rice in China?
Money. I'm into aviation. Money.
Power.
Money.
Power.
Man boobs.
Shut up.
I see why Sick the Tank daddies kicked his ass and kicked him out of the house early on.
Man boobs. I'm going to talk over you as loud as I can. I've got my speaker full blast to blow you away.
Shut up.
Mr. Midnight Movie.
My name is Delano. I have killed Mr. Midnight Movie. I stabbed that son of a bitch.
This is
money.
Power.
Money.
Power.
Tired.
Money.
Power.
Money.
Power.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Inflammatory Talk. We're back. It's been over a week.
Yes.
What's up?
It's been over a week. I was a little bit tired, and I still am.
Still
My
tired?
God,
What?
I'm looking at a beautiful woman right now. I'm going to just I don't know why.
That'll wake
but
you
right
up.
now, I'm just I'm gonna put this on Facebook just because I want to watch it later.
Is that how old people wake up?
Yes.
I should know. I'm one of them.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful people will wake me up. Yes.
They will wake me up. But I'm tweeting this all over YouTube as well.
Send it to Brexit.
Send it to Brexit. And this gentleman by the name of Leo Muhammad. He is a foreign-born black person in the Nation of Islam. I think he was born in Jamaica. And it just kind of strikes me how tolerant the British people are to have this person in their country. I mean, would Japan allow somebody like this who spoke bad about Orientals or Asians? Would they allow that person in their country? Or would Koreans? Could you go on? Let me ask you this, JP. Yeah. Could you go on to a street corner if you spoke Korean and spoke about how evil Asian people are and how evil Korean people are? Could you do that and be allowed to live there in their government?
I don't think so. No way. No, you wouldn't get away with it for long. You would be pressured off. And you wouldn't have anyone to go to as for advocacy or anything like that. You'd be on your own, and you'd be forced out.
And that's my whole thing. It's like, Europeans seem to allow. I mean, and we allow free speech, of course, but this is somebody who is. And I've tried to, because I've always been interested, like in just seeing this kind of thing, because I've been interested in the civil rights industrial complex. And I've looked up Leo Muhammad, and I know that I think he came to the country at about 12 years old, and he found the Nation of Islam. And I don't know when he found the teachings. But, he's allowed to be on speakers, I guess they call it Speaker's Corner in England. And if Tommy Robinson, who's part of the EDL, or if anybody who's part of the EDL go on Speaker's Corner and speak about British pride and the fact that they have the desire to not have British, some of these British grooming gangs and stuff that are raping the people now, he would be mobbed up. He would be kicked off and maybe even jailed for hate speech. And I'm just curious to know how hate speech goes in Britain. What is allowed and what is not. And it seems like, the British people got a raw deal as far as Brexit is concerned. I think when I texted this thing out, I think I texted it. Let's see, did I text it to the right place? Yeah, there I did. Yes, I did. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that I texted it in the right place. And then there's Homer Bouvier 1466 Hale Clifford Harrington.
Yes, welcome. If you're joining us now, you're in for quite a show, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it may not be because, it may not be. Like I said,
it might not be.
And it may not be that long.
Half the battle, or what do they say? 90% of the battle is being there.
Yeah. And like I said, I've looked at Leo Muhammad for over the years, and I've seen he hasn't mentioned anything about Brexit, by the way, and I'm just curious to what his full thoughts are. And unfortunately, you didn't get a picture of him on the page on the show page.
Oh yeah, shoot, I forgot about that. That's
no problem at all. But like I said, he's in England, and basically,
maybe I can add one up to our Blog Talk. By the way, you can call us on Blog Talk Radio on our switchboard. We have a guest call-in number, 917-889-9178. I'm going to post it in our chat. We have a chat room. I'm going to post it there right now.
But you have both the Nation of Islam and you also have the Hebrew Israelites in England. And it does seem like, this isn't like America, where the blacks that are here, were basically, they were, sold into slavery by African middlemen, and they were brought here in chains, and, they didn't have a choice in that matter. The difference between a black man in England and a black man here in America, for the most part, he's not an immigrant. He is, basically a product of the. He's a product of the transatlantic slave trade, and that is not the case for the blacks. Even though many of them may be the product, they were in Jamaica, they are immigrants to the land that they're in, particularly England, and they're there by choice. And a country welcomes you in there, and then you join a hate group, and you preach on the corner on how white people are devils. There's also when he was on the Speaker's Corner saying that Caucasians cannot join the group, because he was thinking about joining a group of multi-ethnic people, but the only group that they would not allow is for Caucasians. And it's like, I don't know why the British people even tolerate this kind of thing. It's like, why aren't more people asking him, why are you here? Why are you in Britain? Why are you in England? And, I have scoured YouTube to see if anyone, has the guts or the balls to confront this guy, and to confront the Nation of Islam, and to confront, the Hebrew Israelites that are in that country. These individuals, either they or their parents are foreign born. And it just, like I said, they would never do, they only do this in Western countries. They would never, I don't think they would ever do this in any Arab country, any Persian country, any Oriental or Asian country. Like I said, try to do that. Try to do what you're doing in Japan. Go to Japan and talk about how evil the Japanese people are, or how evil the Asian people are. It's just, it shows a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of ungratefulness. And the fact that you have somebody like Tommy Robinson, who talks about how mistreated the locals are by a lot of these Muslims and a lot of these Muslim gangs and Muslim grooming gangs, and he is kicked out of Speaker's Corner, and he has to get all kinds of extra security. But this man Leo Muhammad is allowed to speak freely. It shows, it basically shows like how perverted the civil rights industrial complex is. It shows the ethnic British could never speak the way this man speaks.
Now you're drawing parallels between Leo Muhammad, Brexit, and the civil rights industrial complex.
Well, Brexit, one of the large...
Just as a reminder to our audience here.
Yeah. One of the large aspects of Brexit was basically who was allowed to become... who was allowed to flow through the country.
I'll admit, I'm a little lost with Brexit. Are you confused by it, or are you pretty clear about what's at stake there?
Well, Brexit was about leaving the EU. And the biggest point of contention with the EU was allowing large amounts of refugees into the country, something that Britain did not want.
Is Brexit, though, is that, do you think, does it stem from the immigration problems that they've had?
I think the biggest...
Because I haven't heard that said before, but I'm starting to think it played more of a role than we're led to believe.
The biggest bone of contention, from my understanding of Brexit, was the fact that they were having large portions of refugees being brought into their land, and it was something that the British people did not want. And you see a lot of videos is like, we were never asked this. This was something that was kind of forced upon us. And political correctness, basically, it's against people of European descent. It doesn't apply to other racial minorities and racial groups. And I don't, that word, a stringent agreement. So, yeah, and as I'm looking here, and, it was, and I don't know why, and honestly, I don't know enough of why it was defeated in Parliament and the deal on how they were supposed to leave, how the European Union was supposed to leave and things like that. But the one thing I do know is the biggest point of contention with the EU was the British people did not have the deciding factor on who comes into their country and who doesn't. And like I said, there are a lot of...
I think he said African-American people who voted for Mr. Trump because he believes it was in the region of 29% of black people voted for Mr. Trump. Well, if I'm completely honest with you, if I would have had the opportunity to vote in that election for lying Hillary or crazy Trump, I probably would have voted for Trump myself. Why? Because, you see, first and foremost, Trump is not a politician. Trump is a businessman. So Trump believes in his ego that he can do a deal with anybody. We need to do a deal with an American president. We want some land. We want a state or territory that we can call our own. So Mr. Trump may be the man to do business with, first. Secondly, Mr. Trump, many white people are very upset with Mr. Trump. Do you want to know why they're so upset with Mr. Trump? Because Mr. Trump is one of these Americans who shoots from the hip or shoots from the lip. In other words, whatever comes into his head, he says it. Politicians are not like that. You can sit a politician down in a studio for 3 hours and ask him 3 questions and you will never get an answer. Trump is not like that. Trump will blurt out the answer. That's why many white people, especially people in power, are very upset with Mr. Trump, because he says what they think, but they will never say it. They're all racist. Trump is no more racist than Bush.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess, like I said, they're interesting characters to a degree, but at the same token, like I said, I don't know why.
Is he the leader of Nation of Islam?
In England, I think he might be like in the London chapter. I think he may be.
Oh, okay.
There used to be a whole, a whole dossier on him, but it seems like things have been kind of wiped clean off of that. Certain things are kind of taken off. Like, for example,
I can't find anything with his commentary on the EU. I think that would be one example of that.
Yeah, no, and he doesn't. He hasn't spoken about it.
We do have a call. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's take a call.
Okay. It's unknown. I don't know who you are. So, hello, you're on with Mr. Midnight Movie and Jewish producer. What's up?
Hello.
What's up?
Hey, how you doing? Money Mike here.
What's up, Money Mike? What can we do you for, man? Mr. Midnight Movie, do you have any, did you have a question for Mr. Midnight Movie or a comment to make?
No, I'm just listening for the moment, but if I have a question, I'll chime in.
Sounds good, man. Right on. Mr. Midnight Movie, where are you going with that? Oh. I hung up on my dude. Let me call you back in, okay, Mike? Oh, I'm sorry. I got. We had a guy named Money Mike call in, and I got disconnected from you because of this stupid Skype.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't have a comment. I'm sorry. You know what, Mike? If you want to call us, we have a Skype. Not a Skype line. He called us on Skype, but if you can call our 917 number. 917-889-9178. It makes it easier because my Skype's not upgraded. It sucks.
Yeah.
True. It does suck.
True that.
But it's not that bad.
Yeah. It's half bad.
So, now is this a caller on Skype or is this a caller on our Blog Talk show?
I don't know. Money Mike. I don't know who that is.
It sounds like it sounds like a voice that I've heard before.
Yeah, he sounds familiar. So sorry if I didn't recognize you off the bat, but call us.
Recognize.
If you could call us on our
No, I can hear him. So okay, all right. Well,
no, that's Apocalypse. You're hearing.
Yes.
Money Mike, though, you didn't hear, and
yes. Now, APOC, do you have any comment, or did APOC have any comment on the situation at hand about Leo Muhammad and Brexit?
Yes. I think that they're not going to do Brexit, and they're just going to strong arm it, and basically that was a pointless vote since they're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point of even voting on stuff if you're not going to follow through, And so, democracy failed.
It sure did. I mean, who do we blame for? I mean, who do you think is to blame for that failure?
People in charge. People in charge have to implement. They didn't. Theresa May did not want a Brexit, so she's done what she's done so far. Stall, and then, you have all the media that didn't like it. Because, I think it was like 52-48 was the vote for and against, and a certain amount of people didn't want it, and those people, fought pretty hard to, delay it and not make it come to fruition, and all the people for Brexit were like, yeah, it's coming, and it got them nowhere. So
I'm sure if Nigel Farage had been prime minister, it would have went differently. Now, I mean, the thing is, Theresa May is a conservative.
Yeah,
she's in the Conservative Party, but she is she seems like a Meghan McCain kind of conservative. Not really in favor of the whole Brexit, and she seems like she's probably in favor of a lot of hate speech laws, and like she's kind of a social justice conservative.
Yeah, absolutely. And not every conservative was down for Brexit, too. Actually, a lot of Labour people were for Brexit, but not for the immigration issue, just the costs and all that. So there was a lot of weird factors. Not as like Republican and Democrat as it is in the States. So, yeah. But, ultimately the people voted for it, and they're not getting it. So, I don't know. I don't think they're going to riot or anything, so just going to fade away.
Although I heard the biggest issue for Brexit was immigration. That was the main reason why people voted in favor of it. They wanted control of their borders, and they wanted control of who comes in and who doesn't come into their country.
Absolutely, and that should always be. You should always have control of your own country. You shouldn't have been part of EU to begin with. So, at least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I don't, but I mean, I guess the and do they have a different, and I'm kind of ignorant on English politics. Do they have a direct? Because how did Theresa May even become prime minister? Because she seems very unpopular with the people. How did she become? Was she appointed prime minister, or did she win an election?
She did not win an election, so no.
And and God forgive me, on this thing I'm very ignorant. Is the prime minister is it elected like it's elected here, or does the parliament pick the prime minister?
They usually have runoffs over there. It's more like a general primary, kind of like in the States. So
yeah, and I'm just surprised that. So who appointed her? And I'm just surprised on how she because she seems very unpopular. How she became prime minister to begin with.
I wish I could comment more on that. I did
not. Me too. I'm very illiterate.
I'm not there. I'm not.
I wish I was more. This is probably something like getting more involved. I'm so not involved or not inclined on the politics. Mainly because I have strong feelings about where they could all go. I'll go to hell. And but when it comes down to the inner workings of politics, I'm pretty bad. I should know how all this stuff works, though.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd like to know too. It's just like, it's just and like I said, can anyone force PM Theresa May? I guess, and there's a lot of calls for Theresa May to resign, actually.
Yeah, she's just not popular at all. Really on any level. From conservatives or liberals, just no one really likes her.
Yeah, she's trying to play both sides of the fence, and she is, like I said, I think Britain would do well to have a Nigel Farage in there to really kind of clean house. And I think they should expel a lot of people. I wish Britain would just really clean house and really drain the swamp, so to speak. And just,
way too many people there. If you think about it, the UK is basically the size of Oregon, right? Consider all its territories. And there's 78 million people. 70 million people in Oregon. I mean, that's just too many people.
All right, so I'll read this really quick. Because the Prime Minister is the leader of the largest part of the House of Commons, and the individual who command the support of majority of MPs, both main political parties have somewhat arcane processes for electing leaders. That's probably why we don't know about it. I know a whole lot about it here. Because our political system is such a wreck. For the Tories, there are a series of votes among Tory MPs to reduce any list of candidates to just 2, and the names of the resulting duo are then voted on by the members of the Tory party in the country. This electorate is likely to be elderly and, for the most part, middle class, and as such, not likely to select a progressive candidate. And it goes on and on. Theresa May could have become Prime Minister without an election, and 12 months later decided to seek her own mandate from an electorate. The people of Britain did not give her the answer she hoped for. All right, this is confusing. I don't know. This must be somebody from the UK that wrote it. I can't understand his writing.
Yes.
But I don't think... How did Theresa May become Prime Minister of the UK without an election? And I think that's confusing. That is what got me really confused.
It's saying because the Prime Minister is the leader of the largest party in the House of Commons, i.e. the individual who can command the support of the majority of the MPs. So.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with that, sort of. I don't know. It just seems cheap going that route.
Yeah, I like our rigged election process much better.
Yeah, I do too.
There's really no good way to go about it. It's
I don't think there is a good way. Picking leaders is a joke.
I wonder how, and I wonder how good Nigel Farage would come in. I'm tweeting you something, JP.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I'm tweeting to you something on Brexit. I think you should take...
Just a few short years ago, Mr. Midnight Movie couldn't even log on to Twitter. Now look at him. He's tweeting.
Yeah, I'm tweeting to you, and I don't know if you want to open up your Twitter page.
Yeah, I'll open it up.
This shows half Asian guy's perspective on Twitter, on Brexit.
Yes.
If you want to just take a look. I don't know if it tweets because I tweeted something like this before and it didn't work. So I tweeted something to you and see if you got that tweet, by
Britannia.
the way.
Oh, yeah. I see it now. Oh.
It's what I recently just tweeted to you.
That one?
Is it the Asian guy in the barber chair?
Yeah, he just got his head shaved.
You didn't think that was funny at all?
This is probably the best Brexit metaphor we have seen.
Yes. He just got half his head shaved.
He just shaved his head off. The guy just shaved his head.
He was doing a barber thing, and he shaved like a big line right down his head.
Right down the middle.
He wanted to murder him. He wanted to samurai chop him.
What the fuck are you doing? Get off my hair.
Maybe I'll send this to APOC, too, so he can take a look. Give his perspective on how he would feel if someone did that. Damn it.
So nobody's called in yet. You could call in, people. Guest line's not... Sorry, I didn't mean anything by that, Apocalypse. Thank you for calling in, but we don't have any other guests calling in. 917-889-9178.
Yeah, people should call in and listen to this. Listen to me rant.
You should argue with Mr. Midnight Movie. You should tell him how you feel. You should support Leo Muhammad.
Yeah. So, now, Sadiq Khan says MP should have revoked Article 50 rather than... Sadiq Khan. Now, he may be prime minister someday, or a Muslim may be prime minister if the demographics change, and they seem to. A lot of people believe in about 40, 50 years, the demographics of Britain will no longer be people who are ethnically British. It will be something else, which, by the way, isn't happening to Japan. It's not happening to Korea. Not happening to China. Not happening to India. It's only happening to European countries and countries, I would say, within the European diaspora that have majority people of European descent in them, that they're the ones that are being replaced with other ethnic groups. And just a thought there. It's just like, why is that okay? Or why is... it seems like it's not, like I said, it's not happening in any of the Asian countries. It's not happening in any of the Arab countries, any of the sub-Saharan African countries. It's only happening in countries that are European. Can you check? You know what? I'm going to add someone to our call. See if she has anything to. Yeah, just put. Gosh darn it. See here, let me add. So I'm adding Ruthie to the call if she wanted anything to say.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes.
Hi.
Hello
Hi, how
there,
are you?
Ruthie.
Hey, Ruthie, how are you?
Fine.
Good.
I call specifically with a request. I was wondering by chance if you two are ever considering going on another show. I was thinking, I have Spreaker and I have
absolutely.
Blog Talk, and I was wondering if we could schedule something. I have a lot to tell you about music and different things.
Absolutely, we would love to do that.
When are you free? When are you available?
Almost every night.
Usually Wednesdays is best for me, but I'm available most days. But Wednesdays
are working out lately for us. We've already blocked our every Wednesday for a show for sure. Whatever else we do on other nights is extra. So
yeah.
So, what are the topics? Are there any topics that I could join in on?
Well, right now we've titled this show "Leo, Muhammad and Brexit." Do you have any opinion on Brexit by any chance?
My opinion is that if Theresa May had followed President Trump's suggestion and guidance, she wouldn't have had all these rejections. But she wanted to show that she was strong and a strong woman, and she knew what she was doing. And you see the result.
Now, how did Theresa May get, because she's very unpopular, how did she become prime minister?
They voted her in like any other candidate.
So she ran?
She has good ideas. She had very good ideas.
Yeah, because right now she seems to be very unpopular with the British people.
Yeah, very unpopular. And I notice how things swing, how behaviors and who's friendly and who's leading, how that changes when the entire United States was very sure that, oh my goodness, this fellow, this, how would I say, this hawker, this guy that does reality shows and braggart, constantly talking about himself and promoting himself, and crude, he'll never be the president. He became the president. And it became very popular to take pot shots at him while everything stayed calm and quiet, while people didn't feel they had been duped. Now it's 2 years later, and after we waited for Jesus, the second coming of Jesus, which was Mueller with his report, he said there's no collusion here. I didn't find anything in here that says he colluded with the Russians. But he did find, and it's legal, he did find that Obama had set up wiretaps, because as a president can do that. He doesn't even have to ask permission or go through FISA or anybody else. The president has the authority to do that. So he did it. He used it to torment his opponent, the person that led the other party. And that happens. Now, slowly, one by one, all those people that realize, and I've said it on your show many times, when the individual is running for office and two or more are conspiring and gossiping, that's all it is. But once you get together and that person has declared that they're running and you're talking about them and creating things behind that person's back, all it is seditious conspiracy. But seditious conspiracy is what put those Puerto Rican terrorists from the 50s in prison for 40 years. That's what they were charged with, seditious conspiracy. Now, on the day that the president took office, the day he was sworn in, that behavior, that is now treason. And that's the problem. If you watch TV now, everybody that made a big declaration, President Trump, he's terrible, we got to get rid of him. Now they're all walking it back because they know. Now it's been proven. Now people that felt they were duped, now they're talking. And what have I always said on radio about criminal activity? The first one who talks, who confesses first, is going to get the best deal. Now they're all trying to cut a deal. And what you don't hear on regular television and radio is that almost every day, some person from the former administration is caught at the airport trying to leave the country.
Now, I just got a thing from Apocalypse. He wrote in our speaker channel how is the UK Prime Minister chosen? The Prime Minister is not chosen, is not directly elected. Instead, the publics vote for a single member of Parliament, a representative from their constituents, and there are 650 MPs in total. If one political party has a majority in the Commons, the leader of that party will be appointed Prime Minister.
And how does that make a difference in how popular they are or aren't? Because I remember when who was it? He was a very good-looking fellow. He was a good friend of Obama's. What was his name? The Prime Minister, very popular. I forget his name.
Blair.
Yes,
Tony Blair.
Yes, Tony Blair. And Tony Blair, for a time there, he was a god. Anything he said, they would play it 5-10 times a day on American television, 20 times a day in Europe. And when he fell out of popularity, when he didn't keep the right friends, all of a sudden, you could say anything awful about him. So I'm not surprised Theresa Blair's in the same situation.
Theresa May, yeah.
Theresa May, rather. I'm not surprised.
Well, she seems a little bit politically correct. And we were talking about Leo Muhammad, who's part of the Nation of Islam in London. And I kind of said, this kind of thing is only tolerated in the West. I don't think Japan would ever tolerate somebody immigrating or even being in their country and going on a corner and speaking bad about Japanese people.
No, it wouldn't be tolerated, not for 5 minutes.
And I imagine the same thing with Hong Kong or anywhere else. And I'm surprised that that Britain and Germany, they allow people whom they've allowed to come into their country to speak really bad about them and just put their...
The different considerations. The older people in power see the big picture. They see that every 5 or 10 years you have to have so many babies born. As they get older, those babies will become teenagers, then men and women, and they will be working. adding to the tax base. So as the older community dies off, you still have that tax base fulfilled by the new generations that are coming. But in Europe, there were some countries that had almost no birth rate. It was so small. So they thought, we'll bring in the refugees, they'll assimilate, they'll all work, and they'll fill the tax rolls. Nope, didn't happen. They refused to assimilate. Yeah. Some of them arrived, and it's funny how you don't have food, you don't have clothing, you have nothing, but you have a cell phone, and that cell phone has a bill. Now they arrive in Germany demanding, they say that they are guests of the country and that they don't have to work, and they're refusing to learn the language. It's quite something. In Switzerland, they'll give you $1,000 to get the hell out of there now. You want to go home? Here's $1,000. Go home. Get out of here.
Yeah.
They've learned their lesson. I had videos that showed young girls minding their own business, going in the subway in Europe, and the young refugees would beat the hell out of them if they didn't let themselves get touched and kissed, because you got to realize they've grown up in the mountains where they are the sole word. They get the final word on everything. A 9-year-old, for instance, in a family has the final word. A 9-year-old boy has the final word over women in the family. These are very misogynistic communities, and they think that they're going to pick them up, move them to Europe, and all of a sudden they're going to have European manners. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
And here's the thing, Ruthie. We weren't even allowed, and why I call it the civil rights industrial complex, we weren't even allowed, the Europeans were not even allowed to talk about this subject openly. And what you just said would have been considered, and still
hate speech. Hate speech,
yes.
Islamophobia. I would have been jailed. There are people there are cases. Oh, what I was going to say was that those cases where those women were 14. They're not women. They were 14, 15, 16. They were taking the subway. They were wearing their winter coats, so it's not like they were walking around naked. They're wearing their winter clothing. They're on their way to school or on their way back from school. They're on the subway or the buses, and the refugees would beat the hell out of them if they didn't let them feel them up. And I mean beat the hell out of them as in kicking them in the head. And I had those videos. Do you know that YouTube put an age restriction on them? It's amazing. We can watch any entertainer do anything vulgar on stage, and it's perfectly acceptable. But don't show a video with someone, an innocent person, being brutalized and if they're a refugee, then it's anti-Islam. See what I'm saying? So the parents, when they went to the police station in Germany to file a complaint, they were instead charged with Islamophobia by the police instead of having the opportunity to fill out the violence report against their child. That's why a lot of them started just getting up and leaving. Lots of Europeans. Have you seen an ad anywhere? Radio, television? Come to Germany. Come to London. Come to Spain. Not a one.
No.
Not a one. Not a one.
Yeah, it's become a complete disaster.
And my friend who loves everything that's different. She doesn't care for anything American, doesn't care for anything conservative, doesn't care for any conservative values. Just freedom. I want to be free. I want to be free. Loves all this nonsense because they live in areas where they don't get to see the reality. And this friend of mine was telling me that the relatives went to Europe, in London, spent 2 weeks. They didn't see a thing. This isn't happening. That's why Europeans began videotaping what's going on there. Not what the press tells you, but what's really going on there. Videotaping it and posting it to YouTube. And YouTube has started taking it down because it's too immediate. It's too instant. Countries were able to make a statement. The statement was released to the press. The press put it in print, on TV, in the radio, and that's what the community accepted. But now anyone in any situation can just pick up their phone and live stream it anywhere. Anything. And it's changed everything. Because a country, a government can't put out a statement now and just let it stand. And
you don't think they were ready for this?
We were used to that.
You don't think they were ready for this? Don't you think they're just 10 steps ahead of this game?
They were not ready. Nobody's ready for that. They even brought in youngsters. You see how we have all these unaccompanied youngsters that we have? Europe had them too. Now, do you remember when this tragedy of all these caravans began? What was the first thing President Trump offered, which was very intelligent? I had said it for years. Let's DNA them. It takes 12 hours to get a DNA back. Let's do that. They immediately stopped doing it after a week and a half. Why? Because in Mexico and in Latin America, they give out pamphlets. They say if you have a toddler with you or younger, they can't hold you more than 20 days. They have to let you go. And the kid doesn't even have to be yours. So a lot of these people that want to come here, like the drug cartels, they will tell anybody that's poor, hey, I'll give you $10,000, not American, 10,000 in their money, for that kid if you don't want him, and they'll bring him here because they know that once they get to the fence, that's all they need. That's all they need. There's a wonderful video on YouTube that showed a guy bringing a 2-year-old whom he doesn't know and never saw before. He started dragging this 2-year-old all the way, across the desert and going through the journey with the coyote. And that's another word we have to identify. A lot of people don't know what coyote is. Coyote. It's coyote. It's what they call in Latin America, what they call a trafficker. These are traffickers. It's not a mild name. It's just that the American media has learned that when they use a word that Americans don't know, Americans accept the word without attaching the fear and the animus that should go with that word. These are human traffickers. Coyotes are human traffickers. That's all they do. Why? Why is it why is it happening so much now? Because if I give you a drug, you're going to consume it. Once you've consumed it, the drug is gone and it's over. So I can only charge for that crime one time. I can only make money when you take that drug from me and you consume it. That's the end of the revenue there. But if I bring a kid, I can use that kid and have it out for the use of men every hour or so, every day. That's big money. They're traffickers. I would like Americans to stop getting used to and lullabied by the word coyote, coyote. It sounds like a cute little animal, a coyote. No, it's not that's a human traffic professional that makes money doing nothing but bringing kids into another country. Why another country? Because in the other country, that kid has no rights. Those cages in those shelters are not there because President Trump put them in. Those cages have always been there because the only animal that humans replicate in behavior when they're all trapped in one space are rats. And the teenage boys would rape the younger ones, whether they were boys or girls. When the teenage boys are experiencing their natural development, they're going through puberty, they would sexually attack the younger ones or the women. That's why they put them in cages, is to protect them. And they've always been in cages. And nobody knew that except people who had gone through the process. But a lot of the kids that they take are children that don't belong to them. These are children that they buy for a few dollars.
Do you believe in that Pizzagate scandal, or do you know much about it?
I didn't accept a lot about it because when things get extremely exaggerated, I try to stay away from it. And I'll explain why.
Yeah, because I'm not sure how exaggerated it was. I don't claim to know.
I'll show you. I already told you my age.
Does that factor?
I'm not a teenager.
Oh.
When I was a teenager, was many decades ago, and I worked in a recording studio, and we had just gotten the craft contract, which included a thing called Jell-O. Remember Jell-O? And the number one star of Jell-O commercials was Bill Cosby. And when I repeated to the police what I had seen, they would not believe it. Because that was too exaggerated. I saw a woman whose teeth were now facing the inside of her mouth. It was the most unusual thing. Tremendous violence. But the entertainment industry would contain it because they made so much money with Bill Cosby. And when all these women came out and they gave these exaggerated stories, who believed them? Nobody. How many of them got fired for even talking about it? Many of them. I got fired twice, and I wasn't even a victim. And for every victim, there are 50 to 100 witnesses. So even if you shut down the people and got them to stop talking, that's only the ones who wound up in court. There are still hundreds more who never filed, who never came forward, and they experienced tremendous violence. Now, decades go by, and some young girls are coming forward saying that this guy, Weinstein, raped them, that this guy, Weinstein, beat them up, threw them down a set of stairs. Nobody would believe it. But he was making big money, and the actors in Hollywood were making big money through Miramax. So they tolerated a lot of stuff. And if you were well protected and you had good parents and good managers, and, well, he couldn't really get to those. But the ones who didn't have that type of protection were brutalized. Nobody would believe them. Nobody would believe them. It was a feel-good story to know that these actors were having all these successes with Miramax. It was a great movie house. Look at all the people he's brought in. Look at all those youngsters. He's brought in George Clooney. He's brought in all these wonderful young men who are now writing movies. Ben Affleck. You see what I mean? They were celebrating the positive and ignoring the fact that behind it all was an extremely violent man. A predator. An absolute predator. And we do that in entertainment a lot. 50 years they protected Cosby. 30 years they protected R. Kelly. And I'm so sad to tell you that there's maybe 20 or 30 more just like them doing exactly the same thing right now.
I don't doubt it.
Now, so this person said, my father worked in telecommunications his whole life in New York. He encountered Bill Cosby many times. Cosby was and is a total racist. What would you say to that person's comment about him, Ruthie?
Absolutely correct. Do you know what I do today? I make groups. I get groups together. For instance, for syndicated news, instead of going and getting a whole bunch of people with 1,001 ideas, I went and I invited semi-retired people who already had a full history, a full career, maybe 1 foot into retirement, maybe 2. And one of the people that I invited was someone who would provide music for us. Because one of the most expensive things on the internet, by the way, is music. Very expensive. And in doing interviews, I needed music for the intro and the outro. I wanted really good music, but music that was licensed so YouTube wouldn't keep taking it down.
Right.
Okay. So I talked to John McEwen, and he said, yeah, I'll join you. So a lot of the music for the intros and the outros on Blog Talk Radio is his music, and we provide a licensing agreement where he gives us permission to use it. We have to provide it to YouTube. YouTube is really silly. We give them the permission, and they keep knocking stuff down. They just did it this week, and I'll tell you about that later. They did it again. Anyway, the point is, he came in, and he's got a long history in entertainment. When he was a teenager, he worked in the magic shop. And down the block from him lived a kid called Steve Martin. And John McEwen, who was one of the founders of the Nitty Gritty, who no longer is with the Nitty Gritty, he already let that go. He was with them 50 years, and then he went on his own. Mm-hmm. John McEwen and Steve Martin have been friends since they were teenagers. They worked and did magic tricks at the magic shop to entertain the customers and to get them to buy things. And that's what they were really, really good at. That's how they built their relationship. And one day, this fella comes to John McEwen and says, I know a kid that's looking to learn how to play the banjo. You want to teach? You want to give some lessons? He said, sure. Who is he? His name's Steve Martin. He works at the magic shop. He said, that's a friend of mine. He works with me. I work at the magic shop. So he goes, Steve, you want to learn the banjo? Yes. So he taught him how to play the banjo. And by the way, every time Steve Martin gets an award for playing banjo, I make it a point to put on the notice on YouTube. Don't forget to tell people John McEwen taught you how to play the banjo. Because he doesn't like to say that. So I make sure that people know that it was John McEwen who taught him how to play the banjo. And during that time, they were very, very young, and Steve Martin became a stand-up comic, and John became part of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. So when the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band would play, their opening act would be either Steve Martin or Bill Cosby or some other entertainer. See where I'm going? Do you see what I'm saying? When they had a private meeting in a room, a closed door room, one day. Oh, and by the way, the manager to Steve Martin and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band for a while was John McEwen's older brother, William McEwen. He managed them. And one day in a closed room when there were all sorts of men and women that did all sorts of related business and production and all that were in there, Bill Cosby marched into the room and ordered all the white crackers, the F out of the room. He did. He said that. And then he proceeded to take apart all of their businesses that day, and his network, which I believe was NBC, helped him do it. So a lot of men and women lost their businesses that very day, strictly on prejudicial reasons, simply because he was a racist. And he would talk to the engineer where I worked and brag to him about his, the way women didn't accept him. As women would go by in the studio, he would point at them as he was talking to the engineer and say, see that one? See that one right there? See what? The redhead. See her? And the engineer would say, yeah. That one, if I went to her house, she wouldn't even let me come in the front door. She'd make me come in the back through the servant's entrance. And women that didn't entertain him and become real friendly with him, almost always, if he thought that there was any uppityness about her or that she was standoffish, those were the ones he went after. Those are the ones he went after. And I didn't look him in the face ever. I would not look up. I only looked at him when he wasn't looking at me, but I never locked eyes with him. I always looked away. And my dad recommended that. He said to me, don't look him in the face. That's what he wants. That's the power. Then he can say that you're being a prejudiced person and you're doing it because he's black. But he used to use that to pummel women, and he had that huge chip on his shoulder. I was once asked to bring scripts that he wanted edited, to bring them to his home, and I was sent in a taxi. And I threw them in the door. I threw the whole envelope in the door. And when I threw the envelope in the door, it went right through his legs. And he wasn't really dressed. He was wearing a bathrobe, which was very unusual to come and answer the door in a bathrobe. And I never got away from the car. I left the door open, and I pitched it in, and I said to the driver, take me back to the studio. By the time I got back to the studio, he was already on the phone demanding that I be dismissed, that they take my job from me. And I was a kid. I was a receptionist. I wasn't talent or anything like that. I wasn't a professional. I was a high school kid being a receptionist. But if he didn't get his way, he'd make sure you lost your job.
Now, he was also instrumental in the whole, I mean, he was one of the people who supported Tawana Brawley, by the way.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
And
yeah. Him and Al Sharpton.
Yeah. And you know, he kind of did the thing that the white cops were accused of.
Yes.
He said it was only him. It wasn't any co-conspirator. And it's very devious how these people work. And the thing is,
you don't get away with it unless your society supports you, protects you, and cocoons you. Don't forget that every time he committed a crime, he had the opportunity to board a private jet and go to a country that had no extradition treaty with the United States and lay out there until it was cool for him to come back.
Why didn't he do, I mean, I don't understand why he didn't do that.
He did it all the time. When things got hot, he would get on a plane. I remember he was working at our studio, and all of a sudden, these people would come, hurry up, and they had to end what work he was doing in the studio. They would stop it abruptly. They shuffle him off in a car, and he would go to Teterboro Airport. He would go to these different airports to catch a plane to get to an international flight. Sometimes they were private jets, and they would take off right from there. Whenever things got hot, he'd take off.
And it's just surprising, like something like. And the fact of the matter is, he had a lot of enablers.
The attorneys that allowed him to do it are still working today. Do you know that the attorney that was most responsible for cocooning Cosby now represents Charlie Sheen? Charlie Sheen was, same guy, singer. He was having sex with people knowing he was already HIV positive, knowing it full well. He knew
That's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible. And,
but who cocooned it? Somebody had to protect it and cocoon it, his attorney. I've always said that if they applied the RICO Act, they have every possible standard for a group that's enriching themselves from organized crime, racketeering, and they wouldn't use it. And the reason I didn't wind up as a witness, because there were witnesses that came forward, is because I refused to take a penny from that. And since the attorney, if I don't take any money, then the attorney doesn't get his third. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I received the contract 3 or 4 times, and each time I sent it back, I said, you left the part in there that says that I'm accepting some type of remuneration, and I've told you I don't want to make anything on this. I'm testifying on principle.
Yeah.
But when I spoke to the authorities, they didn't want to believe it. They didn't want to believe anybody. They didn't. And police departments become corrupt after 20 or 30 years as well. And I remember being driven, supposedly going to the movies or out for an evening, and I was dating a cop who said, we got to drive to the Lipstick Building, which was on 57th in Manhattan. And he had to take a police report from the station, drive it up there to the attorneys, to one of the attorneys that represented him, hand it in, and he got 4 front row seats to a play, dinner for 4, unlimited, no limit to the dinner or the liquor. See what I'm saying? Plus cash. So it'd be, cops wanted to get those reports and turn them into the attorneys right away. Absolutely. And don't think that they didn't hound the girls after they went to the authorities, because the authorities themselves would advise the girls, you have no case. Just drop this. You have no case. Or they would tell them outright, if you try a case, they're going to go after you. They've got more money than you do. Just letting you know.
How much was Cosby protected by the race card?
50-60%. He would pull it whenever he wanted to, even though he was in the wrong and even though he was the aggressor. In conversations, because I wouldn't look up, but I would listen to them talk in the studio, and he would bring up conversations that he engineered the conversation to go in a particular direction so that if you said anything, he pulled a race card. You know who reminds me of him? That new Congresswoman, Omar.
Oh, really?
Yep. And you don't see that until you become older, because then you get to see the trends come and go. And you get to see, he's already in his 80s. Now she's a young woman and she's coming up, but the behavior is the same. And I'm embarrassed to say and heartbroken to say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also doing the same thing. And that's unfortunate, because everybody had high hopes for her. If she doesn't have data, if she doesn't have information for us, one thing that I think you saw again and again, when I tell you something, your audience starts searching up what the heck I said, and they find it. It's there. I don't talk about anything I cannot prove. If I don't have the proof, I don't say it. I don't say anything. I waited for years now for somebody right in the inner circle of Obama to get indicted. And it came today, it was filed this morning. It was Obama's attorney. And immediately I wanted that indictment, and I have it. I don't talk about anything unless I have the documentation in my hand. And even if it's true, if I don't have the documentation, I don't discuss it, because when people say prove it, you have to be ready to prove it. So I don't talk about anything that's not provable. Everything I've ever told you on your show, your audience can go and look it up on the internet, and they will find what I told you.
And with that being said, guys, I got to get myself to bed. Is there anything else to add before we end this show, JP?
No, very interesting stuff. Again, though, thank you, Ruthie. You have a great way of expressing yourself, and thank you for sharing again. Some interesting stuff. I don't think we could have gone that far.
Let me put our show, our show. I was gonna just put.
I was only calling to invite you to see if we could do a show. We just did a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what show? What show are you talking about, by the way?
I already have syndicated news on Blog Talk Radio, and I have syndicated news on Spreaker.
Oh, just like us. Okay. We're on both now. Tonight we're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio and Spreaker, both. But,
fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Because if you do it on one, you can upload it to the other.
That's true. We like doing them live simultaneously. It's a little bit trickier, but no
I can give you more coverage. I can download the MP3 of the show you just did, and I can load it on my Spreaker and my Blog Talk Radio. So now you have 4 locations.
And it does work, Ruthie. The last show you were on was the show we did on Blair Imani.
Yes.
And our numbers were tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
of course, across all of our.
You have to remember the world is round, and there are people from all over the world listening, and a lot of them don't have television or internet, but they have this type of radio. They can hear internet radio, and they listen because they're learning English. And if you speak slowly and you enunciate, they will listen to you first. Over other shows.
So. We hope so. The numbers weren't that good. I hope we do get across the world, though, one day. Our numbers are interesting. We've been played in many countries, but some regularity would be nice. And I think the more we do it, part of it is for a couple years.
I tell people, sometimes it takes them 20 years to believe me.
All right.
I tell them, if you just put one expletive in your show, countries automatically shut you off at the door, so you don't even get in.
Show on Blog
if they don't
Talk
listen to me.
That's true.
On the internet.
That's true.
Shut up. Nobody,
listen to Inflammatory Talk again and again.
Like
Mr. Midnight Movie and Jewish Producer can be
Mr.
found
Movie,
everywhere.
And Jewish Producer.
From Twitter to Facebook.
We tackle the things that
Thank you once again, Ruthie DeTucci, for joining us. By the way, Ruthie, where can people find you? I always forget to mention this.
At your show. I'm making it a point to. I'm not doing any competitive shows.
You don't have a website, though.
I'm trying to help your numbers with the other projects that I'm doing.
And you do. And you do. You help us out tremendously. You do.
Our numbers have increased very well. I do have to get to bed.
Jocking it. Daddy Joe P. Whipping the skipping.